Hidden within the Sistine Chapel, behind centuries of controversy and attempted censorship, hangs what may be the most terrifying painting in the entire Vatican. Nearly 500 years ago, Michelangelo created a masterpiece so shocking, so disturbing, that the church itself tried to cover it up. Hundreds of naked bodies plummet into the abyss. Angels and demons wage war over human souls. At the center stands a divine figure judging humanity without mercy or compassion. But the most haunting detail wasn't discovered until recently. Buried among these tortured figures, Michelangelo may have hidden himself, not as the celebrated artist, but as a piece of flayed human skin, empty and waiting for judgment. This is the Last Judgment, and today we're revealing everything the Vatican doesn't tell you when you visit. To understand why this painting provokes such visceral reactions, we need to understand the crisis that gave birth to it. At the dawn of the 16th century, the Catholic Church was experiencing one of its darkest periods. The Protestant Reformation was tearing Europe apart, fracturing centuries of religious unity. The Pope's absolute authority faced unprecedented challenges. And in 1527, Rome itself suffered a catastrophic sack, a brutal invasion that left the Eternal City humiliated, broken, and questioning everything it once believed unshakable. In the midst of this chaos, Pope Clement VII decided the Church needed something powerful, something undeniable. He wanted a monumental vision placed at the very heart of Vatican power, inside the Sistine Chapel. His plan was to commission the greatest living artist to paint nothing less than the end of the world itself. When Clement died, the ambitious project didn't die with him. His successor, Pope Paul III, immediately adopted the commission and made it official. This is how Michelangelo, who had painted the chapel's legendary ceiling 25 years earlier, found himself returning to the same sacred space. But this time, he would transform the entire altar wall into a colossal mural, measuring nearly 14 meters high and 12 meters wide, a canvas for apocalypse.
The Last Judgment was far from a new subject in Christian art. Medieval and Renaissance churches routinely featured depictions of this terrifying event, the moment when, according to Christian doctrine, Christ would return to separate the saved from the damned for all eternity. Traditionally, these paintings occupied a specific location, the back wall of the church above the exit doors. The placement was deliberate. As worshippers left, they would see this final reminder of divine judgment, carrying that sobering image home with them. Michelangelo defied this convention completely. He placed his Last Judgment on the eastern wall, directly above the main altar, at the absolute heart of the Sistine Chapel. His version confronts viewers head-on, unavoidable and overwhelming. There's no looking away, no comfortable distance. It demands your attention with brutal directness. For this monumental work, Michelangelo drew inspiration from centuries of Western artistic tradition. By the 1530s, established models already existed. The great altar pieces by Fra Angelico, the detailed visions of Hans Memling, and even the chaotic hellscapes of Hieronymus Bosch. He studied them all, then reinvented everything from the ground up. He retained the classic structural framework, Christ surrounded by saints and angels at the top, the dead rising on the left, the damned falling toward hell on the right, and the moment of judgment at the center, where eternal destinies are decided.
But here's where Michelangelo's genius and his disturbing vision truly emerges. In earlier versions, the saints typically appear arranged in orderly fashion, like a celestial court maintaining divine bureaucracy. Michelangelo shattered that tradition. He transformed the entire scene into a massive vortex of movement, as if the wall itself were rotating on an invisible axis. Those ascending appear lifted by supernatural force. Those falling are dragged down by demons. Even those awaiting judgment are tense, twisted, filled with barely contained energy. 3 primary sources inspired this revolutionary approach. First, biblical texts, especially the Gospel of Matthew and the Book of Revelation, which describe the resurrection of the dead and the final judgment in vivid, unsettling detail. Second, the artistic traditions he inherited but chose to radically reinterpret. And third, his lifelong obsession with the human body. Remember, Michelangelo was fundamentally a sculptor. That's why every figure in this fresco, whether angel, saint, or damned soul, possesses such intensely muscular, almost hyper-real physicality. To truly understand the Last Judgment, we need to read it from top to bottom, following the circular movement that revolved around the central figure. Michelangelo placed nearly 400 figures on this wall, each one contributing to the overwhelming composition. At the very top, in the celestial zone, angels carry the instruments of Christ's passion, physical reminders of his sacrifice. We see angels bearing an enormous cross, the column where Christ was scourged, the crown of thorns, and the Roman soldier's spear. Notice something unusual. These angels have no wings. Instead, they possess athletic bodies like trained warriors, carrying the brutal objects that defined humanity's fate.
In traditional Last Judgment paintings, this upper section remains calm and orderly. Not here. Every figure appears tense, leaning, turning toward the center, as if caught in gravitational pull toward the judgment below. Descending slightly, we reach the epicenter, Christ himself. Michelangelo depicts him as a classical god, beardless, with a body reminiscent of Hercules or the Apollo Belvedere. His raised hand performs a gesture called ostentatio vulnerum, displaying his wounds before pronouncing judgment. His gaze fixes on the damned, revealing that this frozen moment captures the instant of verdict. To his right sits Mary, but her traditional role has transformed completely. In medieval Last Judgment scenes, Mary typically intercedes on behalf of humanity, pleading for mercy. Michelangelo paints her withdrawn, head slightly bowed, body turned away, as if accepting that she can no longer help anyone. Her intervention is over. Surrounding Christ swirls a chaotic crowd of saints and the blessed. To his left towers John the Baptist. To the right stands Saint Peter holding the keys of heaven. Some scholars believe he is returning them to Christ, suggesting they're no longer needed. All the saints display the instruments of their martyrdom, perhaps reminding Christ of their own suffering, almost as if questioning their own salvation.
This is crucial. In classical versions, these saints appear serene, confident in their salvation. In Michelangelo's vision, even they seem nervous, tense, almost distressed, as if they too await sentencing. Moving lower, we encounter the angels of the apocalypse blowing trumpets that awaken the dead. Other angels hold 2 enormous books, one containing names of the saved, the other listing the condemned. Here we find one of the most psychologically devastating figures in the entire painting, a man who realizes in this precise instant that he is damned. His expression captures absolute horror. 2 demons grab him, dragging him downward as he covers his face with one hand in futile denial. Now we reach the level of humanity itself. On the bottom left, the dead rise from their graves. Some emerge partially, others gradually regain their bodies, collecting flesh and bone after centuries of dissolution. Angels assist their ascent. This is the most hopeful section of the entire fresco. But crossing to the right side, everything changes. The bottom right depicts the chaos of the damned. Michelangelo took direct inspiration from Dante's Inferno for this hellscape. Bodies contort in agony, while demons, disturbingly human in appearance, drag them downward. Nothing is cartoonish or exaggerated. everything feels horrifyingly real. In this hell appears Charon, the mythological ferryman who transports souls to the underworld. He's furious, raising his oar to strike the newly arrived, exactly as Dante described in the Divine Comedy.
Next to him stands Minos, the infernal judge, with donkey ears and a serpent coiled around his legs. But most notably, he bears the face of Cardinal Biagio de Cesena, who would criticize the painting, declaring that so much nudity was inappropriate for the Sistine Chapel and better suited to a brothel. Michelangelo responded with silent vengeance, placing the cardinal's likeness in hell itself with no possibility of escape. The entire mural functions as a spiral. At the top, the instruments of sacrifice. At the center, the judgment. On the left, ascension. On the right, damnation, all rotating around Christ's commanding figure. But we cannot ignore the detail that has fascinated scholars and viewers alike for decades. Saint Bartholomew, positioned near Christ, holds in one hand the flayed skin of a man, and that face bears a striking resemblance to Michelangelo himself. According to Christian tradition, Saint Bartholomew was martyred by being skinned alive, which is why he's always depicted carrying his own flesh. Logically, the face on that skin should be Bartholomew's own, but it isn't. The face doesn't resemble Bartholomew, it resembles Michelangelo. For years now, art historians have confirmed what has become almost universally accepted. Michelangelo portrayed himself as that flayed skin, without body, without form, completely emptied. This revelation transformed how we interpret the entire fresco. But why would Michelangelo do this?
Some scholars believe it represents an intimate spiritual confession. Michelangelo was in his 60s when he painted The Last Judgment, physically and emotionally exhausted. The Vatican pressured him relentlessly. Critics attacked him constantly. He wrote letters expressing feelings of age, sin, and profound weariness. Placing his own face on an empty piece of skin may have been his brutal way of presenting himself as someone with nothing left to hide before a divine judgment. Others interpret it as his reminder to viewers, and perhaps to himself, that even the most celebrated artist in Rome stood at the same level as everyone else, vulnerable, fragile, fully aware of mortality and judgment. What remains certain is that among all the details in this massive mural, this is the only place where Michelangelo allowed himself to appear. And not as a hero, not as the genius who created this overwhelming masterpiece, but as a discarded skin on the verge of being judged. The Last Judgment remains the most powerful, disturbing, and psychologically complex painting in the Vatican. A vision of apocalypse that still has the power to unsettle viewers 5 centuries after its creation. And hidden within its chaos, Michelangelo placed himself, waiting for the judgment we all must face.